Good morning on Thursday the 31st of March. Recently the Big Issue magazine commissioned a book entitled Letters to My Younger Self, to which various well-known people contributed. The idea was that the writers would share some of what they had learned in life but wished that they had understood earlier. Now, I confess I've not read the book, not yet anyway, but the idea and the review made me wonder what I would have written in my letter. So here is a first draft, and it's not a literary masterpiece. Dear Jim, aged 25. Here I am, writing to you from March 2022. It's hard to imagine such a year existing, isn't it? I remember when you were a teenager, if the year 2000 was mentioned, you thought, gosh, I'll be in my 50s then, really old, and my life as good as over. The years then seemed very long, I recall, and yet the older I became, the more quickly they seemed to pass. So one thing I would say to you is, don't wish time away. Don't be so busy looking at what is ahead, impatient for it to arrive, that you lose the opportunities of each day as it comes. That can happen at any time. Waiting for the school holidays, waiting for exam results, waiting for your wedding day, when the children are small, waiting for better nights, waiting for them to start school, always waiting for the next thing and assuming that when that happens, life might be easier or more settled or somehow just better. Yet, when that time came, there was always another marker on the horizon. And one day, the only thing you're left waiting for is death. So how many days will you spend impatiently waiting instead of enjoying the moment? Your early years were really quite sheltered, weren't they? Your parents weren't adventurous by nature, even if they'd had the opportunity, which of course they didn't. But they did want the best for you. And I think growing up you were perhaps too willing to accept the constraints of your environment. You never really seriously attempted to rebel against it. As you came to see the world as a bigger, more diverse place than you thought, maybe you might try to flex your wings a bit more. The job that you're doing, it's okay, isn't it? You're reasonably good at it. You get on well with colleagues and the students that you teach. But you're not as confident as you might seem. You're mostly reactive rather than proactive, wouldn't you agree? You're not very likely to put your own individual stamp on anything, are you? So can you try to be a bit more innovative, more creative? Worry a bit less about what other people might think about you. Be a bit less predictable. And then there's the whole thing about faith. You never could put a day and a time on your conversion like most other Christians you then knew, and that was a bit of a problem, because some of them, and sometimes you yourself, wondered if you were in fact a Christian at all. Still, no one can remember the experience of being born, but we do know we are alive. I wish I'd realised this much sooner. I wish also that I'd had access earlier to some of the writers and teachers who have expanded and enlivened my faith over the last 20 years or so. Do seek them out, those who widen out your faith into new horizons rather than shutting it down into sterile dogma. And try to read Scripture not as a series of stories over which to argue as to whether or not they are true, but as one big overarching story of God interacting with humankind, a story in which you find yourself, in which you have a significant place, in which you begin to realize that you matter to God. And think of prayer as more like companionship with shared thoughts and shouts and words and silences, rather than as techniques and lists. After all, Jesus said he came to set people free, and it's so easy for the exercise of our faith to become just another prison rather than the wide open space of freedom. Well, I've used up the word count I'm allowed, so I must stop. But I do pray that you and anyone else who happens to look over your shoulder at this will find that growing old is something for which to be thankful, that regrets are always counterproductive, and that this is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. So God bless you, with love from Jim in his 70s.